Okay, Chris Speaks here today with Brandon Mosley for our BCS State of Alabama podcast. We got Congressman Mo Brooks back here with us today. Um, Congressman, I guess there's a lot for us to talk about since the last time. So who's at fault here in this government shutdown, Republicans or Democrats?
Both. The Democrats would normally vote for a continuing resolution to keep the government open, but they're trying to use that CR leverage as a coercive power to get some things that they want done. And the Republicans ought to just pass the continuing resolution. They don't need one single Democrat vote to do that. They operate under the pretense that they need 60%, a supermajority to avoid a filibuster. But that's just a pretense. There is.
Well, that's not in the Constitution.
Pardon?
That's not in the Constitution. That's just a Senate rule that they can change whenever they feel like it.
And they have. The Democrats changed it when they wanted to get a bunch of Democrat Obama judges through about 10, 15 years ago. And then it's also been changed to expand the filibuster exception to appellate court judges and Supreme Court justices. And in each instance, it was a mere majority that did it. So there are no constraints on the majority will in the United States Senate, except those constraints that a majority of the senators want to impose on themselves. And it is absurd for our Republican senators to talk about all this damage that is being done by the shutdown, to blame it on the Democrats when they have the absolute power to avoid it if they would just exercise that power that the voters entrusted them with.
Yeah, the last time the Democrats were in control of the Senate, they almost eliminated the filibuster rule, except 2 Democrats, which are no longer in the Senate, were the no vote, so they didn't quite get there.
Well, it's only a matter of time until the filibuster rule is taken down by the Democrats in the United States Senate. And really the question is how much of the filibuster rule is going to be gone. I think there's a compelling argument to eliminate the filibuster rule with respect to any government spending bill that will result in damage to the American people and the American economy if it does not pass. And that's distinguished from a more defensible filibuster position that you need the filibuster for when there are constructive changes, or depending on your point of view, bad changes to existing statutory law. I can better understand the filibuster rule when you're trying to change the status quo, but if you fail to change the status quo, if filibuster kills it, there's really no damage done to the American people other than the loss perhaps of the benefit of whatever the legislation was. But you're not hurting the American people by requiring that they stay in the status quo as things are. That's entirely different from the spending bills where there is significant damage inflicted on the American people by a filibuster that prevents the spending bills from passing. And as an aside, both Democrats and Republicans now for 29 years straight have failed to pass the spending bills by the September 30th end of the fiscal year deadline. 29 years in a row that they've failed. So we got to do something different.
Congressman, we've seen, I think people are fixing to lose SNAP benefits. I seen a plane crash the other night. I don't know if that's because air traffic controllers aren't going to work. So now people's lives are being put in jeopardy. How long?
That was an engine that fell off the jet plane.
Yeah,
was it? Okay.
Air traffic controllers.
Okay. All right. I just seen it when it happened. How long do you foresee this going?
I think the Republicans are panicking, and they are figuring out that they are losing the battle of public opinion. It certainly did not help the Republican senators or the Republican cause. The imagery that they were trying to put out there, where Donald Trump noted that the United States Senate Republicans have the ability to end the shutdown anytime they want to. All they got to do is accept this legislation from the filibuster rule. So when the President of the United States is pointing a finger at Republicans. It makes it a lot harder for the Republicans to communicate a message that the Democrats are at fault when the Republicans have the power to fix it all by themselves without any Democrat help.
Instead of passing a CR to get us to the next fiscal cliff, if you're going to do this and you're going to end the filibuster or, amend the filibuster rule to allow, why not just pass the 2026 budget and be done with it? Just pass a Republican budget and say, okay, here it is. Boom. We're funded.
Just to be clear, in Washington, different words have different meanings, and the Republicans in the House and Senate have already passed the budget. They did that months ago. You may recall it's a budget that projects spending about $7 trillion more than we have in revenue during Donald Trump's term. So it's a bad budget, but it did pass. And normally with cities, counties, and states, the word budget means that you're actually passing a bill that spends money. Well, in Washington, a budget doesn't spend a dime. It just says, here's our game plan. And then that game plan is followed up with roughly 12 different appropriations bills. So in Washington, appropriations bills are synonymous to budget bills at the city, county, and state level. So it creates a lot of confusion. And you're right. The Republicans ought to just pass the 12 appropriations bills. I think they've already passed the House. I'm not sure. It's not uncommon for these appropriation bills to pass the House and then get bogged down in the Senate because of the filibuster rule. But when you've got one party control, the House, the Senate, and the White House, you should be able to pass a budget and you should be able to pass the follow-up appropriations bills without any worries. And that just shows that we've got a sorry bunch of Republican senators now in the United States Senate.
Congressman, a month ago, Citrilla, I'm butchering his name, the guy, Republican New Jersey, he was slightly ahead or tied in the polls with Cheryl, or I think it's her name, and the lady in Virginia, I'm drawing a blank, she was within striking distance. Is this an omen for Republicans in 2026, a sign of things to come?
Well, it usually is. If you go back to the first term of the Trump administration, he promises winning all the time. But when it comes to elections, he's a loser. In 2017, we lost the New Jersey governorship. We lost a number of legislative seats in New Jersey, Virginia, and the state of Washington. In 2018, under Trump's leadership, we lost the House of Representatives with Nancy Pelosi being reinstated as House Speaker. And then in 2020, we lost the House, the Senate, and the White House. Giving us Chuck Schumer in charge of the Senate, Nancy Pelosi in charge of the House, and Joe Biden as President of the United States. And then what do we have in 2025? It's deja vu all over again. In 2025, in the elections in New Jersey, Virginia, and in California, where we're now going to lose probably 5 congressional seats because they're redistricting, the Republicans took a beating. And, we expect to lose in some of these blue states, but we got beat like a drum, not just, whoa, it was close. We even in Virginia had a Democrat attorney general candidate who's the chief law enforcement officer of the state of Virginia advocating a bullet in the head of one of his Republican elected officials in Virginia, and he still got elected. And then you've got the polling. It's one thing, polling's different than elections. Elections are always the best indicator of where you're headed. And on the polling, Donald Trump's job performance rating has cratered. Real Clear Politics average of the polls as of today has him underwater 11.2%. That's bad. And then you've got his personal approval, also underwater, 7, 8 points, whatever it might be. And then you've got the generic ballot, just simply, who do you prefer, Republican or Democrat running for Senate or Congress? No names used. And the Republicans are slowly but surely getting deeper and deeper underwater with the generic ballot. So all these are signs that the Republicans are going in the wrong direction. The Democrats, from their perspective, are going in the right direction. And then you've got the actual elections on top of the polling data. So yeah, the Republicans better change things quickly in Washington, D.C., and in the White House in particular, if they want to do better in 2026. Otherwise, they're going to have a repeat of Donald Trump's first term. Right now, Donald Trump is 0 for 4 as president of the United States in elections of significance around the country. And 2026 will make it 0 for 6 if we lose the Senate or the House or both during the midterms.
Congressman Brooks, I don't know how closely you're following this U.S. Senate race here in Alabama, but it seems like we've got Steve Marshall, who's a front runner, but hasn't quite sold it to, people of Alabama. And then, Barry Moore and Jared Hudson aren't that far behind. And, Rodney Walker and Morgan Murphy are pulling up the rear. Is any of these candidates, starting to make a name for themselves and starting to get ahead of the pack?
In my judgment, no. They're all good people, but they're all somewhat mellow. And I think we need hard knocks fighters in the United States Senate, people who can go toe to toe with the Democrats, not just in the halls of the United States Senate, not just in the Senate chamber, but also in the news media, and help the public better understand why what the Republicans want to do is best for our country. And then on top of that, we need some Republicans who are actually going to keep their campaign promises, who are going to use all the tools at their disposal to keep their campaign promises. And there, gosh, in Washington, D.C., I'd say something like 80 to 90% of our Republicans utter the words to get elected, but don't follow through and do the things that they said they would do. They'll go through the motions and they'll create the imagery, but they're not getting the policy successes that are needed to keep those campaign promises. And I haven't seen any of this batch of Senate candidates have a track record that, at least as of now, persuades me that they're going to do what needs doing in Washington, D.C. Now, don't get me wrong. I think all of them will do okay, maybe even do good. But right now, with the challenges that America faces, we need excellence.
Are you still looking at getting in that race?
I'm still considering it. I'm more likely to run today than I was a month ago, but I'm still not in the probable gonna run stage. I'm enjoying my life right now, retired. I'm enjoying having 14 grandkids, doing things with them, going to their games, having them over to spend the night, having people over for Sunday dinner. This past Sunday dinner, we had our entire family over. That's 24 people. When you're in the Senate or in the House or in most elected offices, you sacrifice your family. And I did that for decades. And so I'm playing catch up, and it's a nice life. And so something significant would have to happen to persuade me to forego that family enjoyment that I'm now blessed with, and quite frankly, that I owe my family because of all the time that I've been gone sacrificing in public office.
Congressman, when Trump, was running, he said that he'd have the Ukraine-Russian war over with by the time, he was sworn into office. We just celebrated the anniversary of the election. And I mean, we don't seem to be anywhere near a resolution to the Russia-Ukraine war. And it's really a significant war. Is there something Trump can do differently? I mean, he tried to, push pressure on Zelensky to settle, and then he embraced Putin, and now he's distanced himself from Putin and said Zelensky can win the war. Where are we on this?
Well, for the last 10 months, Donald Trump has been with the evil side of that war. He's been helping Vladimir Putin and Russia, and he's done it in a variety of different ways. A lot of it has to do with morale of our allies, morale of Ukraine's allies, morale of the Ukrainian people. He's done a lot to undermine it. He's also aided and abetted the morale of the Russian military forces and one of the most brutal dictators the world has ever known in Vladimir Putin. So Trump's not going to end the war short of either a total or complete surrender by the freedom-loving people of Ukraine in favor of the dictatorial, brutal Vladimir Putin, who heads up what is now Russia, used to be the Soviet Union. So this is one of the places where I most strongly disagree with Donald Trump. I think we should learn from history. And the best history lesson that I think is on point is Adolf Hitler and the Third Reich in the 1930s. And I see Putin trying to reestablish the old Soviet Union, albeit perhaps under the name of Russia. And if Putin is successful in Ukraine, then I anticipate that the Baltics or the Balkans will be next, with an outside possibility of Poland being the next attack point. Putin is not going to stop until you have physically stopped him. And instead of doing the things that are necessary to ensure that the Russian forces that are invading Ukraine lose, Donald Trump has done just about everything he could do to make sure that the forces of evil win. And that's wrong. And by the way, in terms of campaign promises, if you were to make a long list of Donald Trump's campaign promises, I don't think the ledger sheet would balance favorably. He makes a lot of statements. He's great at self-promotion, probably the most effective politician I've ever seen at saying things that are not true and getting away with it. I've never seen anything like it. And in terms of being able to message, he's probably the most effective messenger I've ever seen in politics. But on this one, obviously, it's a failed campaign promise. He did not end the Ukraine-Russian war. And in fact, he prolongs it by encouraging Russian and Putin success.
Actually, along the same lines of ending wars, are we ever going to see the fighting stop in Israel and Gaza?
Well, okay. This is another one of those things where the feather in the cap of Donald Trump and the marketing that Donald Trump has had to make it appear impressive with the outbreak of peace between Hamas and Israel is more mirage than reality. The reality is it's a tough situation in the Middle East. You've had a conflict that has been ongoing for more than 1,000 years. Islam absolutely hates Judaism. They also strongly dislike Christianity, but it is the Jews that the Muslims for decades, make that centuries, have been trying to exterminate wherever they can find them. And so when you've got a people that have an attitude like that, any peace effort is not going to last unless you change the attitude. And the attitudes haven't changed. So it's only a matter of time before Hezbollah or Hamas or Iran, pick your Islamic group or nation, decides to become more aggressive with Israel again after rearming.
Recently, Congressman Mike Rogers, who's been a very enthusiastic Trump supporter, issued a statement upset because Secretary of War Pete Hegseth moved, I think, like 700 U.S. troops, I think, from Romania to redeploy them toward Asia, cutting our force in Romania from 1,700 down to about 1,000. Is this a mistake that, should we be sending, especially with the Ukraine war still ongoing, instead of redeploying for China, shouldn't we be upping our forces in Europe as a deterrent to Russia, maybe to try to pressure this war to end, rather than redeploying for China while we're still in the middle of the mess in Ukraine?
Well, the absolute best path in Europe as you face Russian aggression is for Europe to arm itself and produce the troops that are necessary to be able to defeat any Russian invasion. And Europe ought to be able to do that. Their combined economies vastly exceed that of Russia, so they have the economic might and the infrastructure necessary to sustain a war footing. And they also have a vastly larger combined population than Russia has. So anything that can be done to encourage Europe to take on more and more of its own defense is a good thing. They're our allies, so it also increases our influence and power around the world because collectively we're acting together. So that needs to be the first path. Whether the removal of these 700 American troops from Romania will encourage Europe to replace them with 700 or more NATO or European country troops, that will be the real key. Now, we also have to keep in mind what's going on in Southeast Asia and the Pacific. China is becoming more emboldened militarily. They see the weakness of the freedom-loving democracies of the West in the face of Putin's aggression, and that is encouraging North Korea to be more aggressive. It's encouraging China to be more aggressive. And so to the extent we shift troops over to the Pacific in order to hopefully deter a war breaking out on the Korean Peninsula again, or with respect to Taiwan, that's a good thing. But it's a balancing act. And only time will tell us whether this shifting of 700 troops was wise or unwise. Right now, it's speculative. And I'm not going to say with a certainty that it's wise or unwise. We'll have to see how it plays out. I probably would have kept the status quo, but it's a close call.
Here's along the same lines of using military force. Are we making the right decision with these strikes against supposed Venezuelan drug boats?
Absolutely. We have over 100,000 Americans who are dead each year because of illegal drugs. Those are the numbers of the last few years. And you should add to that the number of Americans who are killed in turf wars as different groups of young men and teenagers, and probably should add some women in there too, are fighting over the drug trade profits. And then you've got another group of Americans who are killed by the drug users who need the money to get the next hit or high or fix, whatever you want to call it. And oftentimes those robberies, those burglaries, they result in the loss of life of innocent American citizens. And so the root cause are, to a large degree, there are a number of causes. I don't want to eliminate all of them by focusing on one or two. Let's just say that a major cause of this loss of life in America is the drug cartels. And to the extent that the United States of America finally wakes up and uses military force to try to protect the American citizenry, I believe that that is a very good thing. And I'm mildly surprised that we've gone decades without any other president having the guts to do what's relatively obvious. And make no bones about it. These are drug running boats. Okay. I've got enough information and experience from having served on the Homeland Security Committee, the Defense Committee, to Armed Services, the Defense Committee, to know that these particular boats that I have seen the footage of are 99.9% probable drug runners. And you can never be 100%. Maybe after the fact you can, if you go to the site and start picking up the bags of whatever they were carrying, whatever kind of drugs they may be. But that's about as good as you can get. If you can be 99.9% accurate with just a tiny fraction of doubt, and you're apt to save a lot of American lives in the process, then you ought to do it as a matter of self-defense. Keep in mind, we went to war in the Middle East over loss of what, 3,000 or 4,000 lives on 9/11? And here we're talking about 100,000 lives per year. In a 5-year span, we've had more Americans killed by these drug profiteers than we lost in entire World War II against fascist Italy, socialist Nazi Germany, and imperialist Japan. So that's how bad it is. It's time we acted accordingly.
Congressman, the tariffs that we put, in place have raised a number of consumer goods, electronics especially, stuff you would give as Christmas gifts. We've had continual food inflation, especially on the meats end. And now, the SNAP benefits look like they may be in jeopardy if the government shutdown continues much longer. And beginning today, because of the shutdown, the Secretary of Transportation has ordered the number of American flights, around the country cut by 10%, leading to, cancellations in air flights. If something doesn't change and change quick, are we looking at Christmas 2025, the first Christmas of the Trump second term, being a disaster for most Americans?
Well, it'll be different. It'll be more challenging. Now, if we still have a government shutdown during the Christmas and New Year's holidays, I'd vote every incumbent in the United States Senate out of office. And I'd vote a number of the congressmen out of office if I had votes in those states where those congressmen are that I have very low regard for. But the American people ought to rise up because, again, there is absolutely no reason to have a government shutdown. None. The Democrats could vote to pass a continuing resolution, which is traditionally how you get out of these messes that the United States Congress has given us. Or on the alternative, the Republicans could exercise the power that they have under the Constitution, and they could just pass the continuing resolution by accepting it from the filibuster rule and do all this without any help from a single Democrat. So it's a pox on both political parties, Republicans and Democrats. And if they haven't fixed this by Christmas and New Year's Day, then every single incumbent ought to face serious opposition. Now, having said that, I believe you're going to see the shutdown in the next week or two at most. Hopefully, I'm right about that. I'd hate to think that I'm wrong, but the Republicans are getting killed. The polling is working against them. They have poor messaging coming out from Washington, D.C. about why they're doing what they're doing. They're showing a lack of spine by not just seizing the power that the public has given them and ending the shutdown themselves by changing the application of the filibuster rule. And I think pretty soon you're going to see what we've often seen, and that's a Republican collapse in a shutdown mode.
Congressman, let me ask you a follow-up question about that, these strikes. Do you not think that we should intercept them, find out who these drug kingpins are, and then make strikes on them, kind of like killing the queen bee?
Intercept them with what?
Well, I'm just watching the surveillance over there. If we have them under surveillance and we have I assume we sent some ships down there. Can't we
No,
intercept
we
them with
don't.
our?
I don't know of a ship that's as fast as these cigar boats that is in the United States Navy. None of our Coast Guard cutters can go that fast. Now, maybe
Okay.
we could very quickly purchase or acquire boats that can go this fast. I'm not going to say they go as fast as some of these bass boats up here in Lake Guntersville that go about 80, 90 miles per hour. But most of our significant size ships, they're doing 20, 30, 35 knots, maybe 40. And the reason that the drug cartels use these cigar boats and even the submarines is because there is very little the Coast Guard or the United States Navy can do about capturing them in the open seas. We just aren't equipped for it. Now, maybe the Navy and the Coast Guard have acquired boats that I'm unaware of. Okay, I'm not saying I'm 100% certain, but I can tell you right now that I'm not familiar with anything that we have that is as fast as those things. And I don't know their top speeds. I could look it up on the internet if you really needed to know, but they're fast and they're designed that way. And I don't think, at least with respect to the service vessels, I don't think that they are actually landing in American harbors or ports or shorelines. I think they're being used to transport the drugs to foreign country shorelines and then transported over land or in smaller boats to American soil.
Yeah, and
Right.
a lot of those, they just bring it out to about the international waters line, dump it in the water, and then, Americans, or Americans in league with the cartels go and pick them up and bring them ashore. There's a little bit of loss there, but I think, they're testing like cocaine can be found in the blood system of dolphins. There's so many tons of this stuff, that's being dumped over the side of boats, for pickup later on.
Wow.
I've read the same articles.
Congressman, here in Alabama, we're debating whether or not we should allow gender ideology books targeted to children to be in our libraries. Some people say this is censorship, and some say this is just protecting kids from really dangerous, procedures. Where do you fall on that?
Well, I don't think taxpayer dollars should be used to promote sexual abuse of children. It's one thing if it's a private library or a private collection of books and some private citizen wants to spend their own money to have that kind of trash. But it's another thing to expect taxpayers to be involved in the payment of the books or the distribution of the books or the storage of the books or every other thing that a library financed by taxpayers does with books. It's strictly a public policy decision. I'd much rather that money be spent on better books, not on bad books. That's my view.
Another thing that's going on right now in politics, Secretary of State Wes Allen is wanting, pushing a bill. I forgot who the representative senator is, to ban people not born in the United States from serving in office. Is that even constitutional?
In my judgment, it is not constitutional. It violates the due process clauses of the 5th and 14th Amendments. It violates the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment, and it violates the Naturalization Clause, which empowers the federal government, not the states, to control who can become citizens and what their rights and responsibilities are once they become citizens. So in my judgment, it's wholly constitutional. And I don't know if you saw it, but I wrote an op-ed on this subject matter. And the three individuals involved, Wes Allen, a fellow by the name of Marks, who's running for Congress down in Baldwin County, and a senator by the name, I think it's Chastain.
Downey Chastain.
They have done more to help Democrats win elections than anybody in the state of Alabama in my lifetime, because you've got roughly 19 or 20 million Americans who are naturalized citizens who are registered to vote. And now you've got a bunch of yahoos who are Republicans sending the message that Republicans want to make these 19 to 20 million voters second-class citizens. Now, if I'm a Democrat strategist, I beat that like a drum. I try to get the votes of every one of these naturalized citizens by talking about how much the Republican Party hates them, as evidenced by what Allen, Chastain, and Marks in Alabama want to do to them. And so to me, it's political suicide. And they're not going to win. It's, as soon as it goes to court, it's going to get struck down. Now, I'm sure that Wes Allen thinks that this is a good position to take in order to help him be elected to a higher office. Same thing for state legislator Marks down in Baldwin County. He wants to be a United States congressman. So he thinks, hey, I can support this bill and it'll help me get elected. You know, it's a campaign kind of gimmick. But gosh, it sends an awful message to people who are now fellow Americans who have become citizens the right way. And I most strongly oppose the efforts of Allen, Representative Marks, and Senator Chastain.
Congressman, we still have low commodity prices for the farmers. I think President Xi in China did agree to buy some American grain, which, you know, made up for some of, you know, the drop, you know, made up, you know, where, you know, they previously stopped buying our grain in response to the tariffs we put on China. This is sort of a mess that was made in Washington. Is there a way for Washington to work out this mess, or are the farmers just needing to find off-farm jobs or something for the next couple of years until this unwinds?
Well, that's a very good question. And the rather random, not well thought out ways in which Donald Trump is imposing tariffs and the amount of those tariffs and who he is imposing them on has left a lot of farmers in America as collateral damage. And I don't know how Donald Trump and the Republicans in Washington are going to try to fix this mess that Donald Trump made, but it does need to be fixed.
There's a follow up with that last question. Do you think this type of xenophobia by Allen is going to play well with the voters?
Well, there are some bigots in all the states in the United States of America. And yeah, the bigoted vote is now headed towards Wes Allen and legislator Marks and Senator Chastain. But still, it's just wrong. You know, these are our fellow American citizens. If you don't like the citizenship laws, if you think they're too expansive, we'll change the citizenship laws. But once they have complied with our laws, they live in the United States of America for the required period of time. They've dotted all the I's, crossed all the T's. They haven't committed criminal offenses, and they've become citizens. They are by definition one of us, and we should treat them with all of the respect that we treat any other American citizen. So, yeah, I am personally affronted at what these three Republicans have done. I think it's a bad image for the state of Alabama. It brings back Jim Crow thoughts. It's a bad image for the Republican Party. And quite frankly, I'm really surprised that more Republicans have not been outraged by the submission of this legislation. I might be the only one who has the only Republican who's taken a public stance against what these three gentlemen seek to do. And to me, that's astonishing. Where's everybody else who believes in equal protection? Where's everybody else who believes in the United States Constitution? Where's everybody else who thinks we ought to treat our fellow citizens in a good way? Where are those people?
You know, I wrote something on it
Congressman,
and posted it. And sorry, Brad, let me tell them this. Posted something on it, and it got a lot of shares in a lot of Facebook groups, and there was a lot of people that was upset about this egregious act by them.
Well, they ought to be upset. It's wrong. It's borderline evil, if not evil. And I'm just, I don't know where their thinking caps were when the three of them huddled together and decided that this would be a good thing to do. I really don't. It baffles me. And it's going to hurt the Republican Party nationally in a big way. And by the way, I forget the numbers, but there's something like 70,000 naturalized citizens in the state of Alabama. And a significant number of those are also registered to vote. Now, if these folks take offense at being relegated to second-class citizenship, and they should take offense, and they hold the Republican Party accountable, that changes a lot of elections nationally and some elections in the state of Alabama. It's just, I mean, it's horrible, the conduct itself that they are advocating, but it's brainless that they would even try it, even if they harbored those kind of thoughts where they want to discriminate against fellow Americans. I just don't get it.
Congressman, we've had some very public, shootouts in Montgomery and Birmingham. And, I think Trump has sent National Guard troops to Portland and Memphis and Chicago and Baltimore and other places. What is it about the American cities that just doesn't seem to work anymore? Where, it's like, it's either a war zone or you'd have to lock it down and turn it into a military occupation state or something.
Well, I'll get to what I would submit is the root cause. The root cause is that you've got a lot of elected officials who are soft on crime. You've got a lot of elected officials who will do most anything to garner a block vote. And you've got a lot of elected officials, particularly in these major metropolitan areas, but also in these blue states and sometimes even red states, that have decided that they're going to restore the voting rights that criminals forfeited by their criminal conduct. And so what do you have in those areas? You have significant numbers of criminals who now have voting rights and who want to vote for candidates who are soft on crime. And the candidates are responding with soft on crime policies. And so the net effect is you end up with more crime. And that's the way it's going to be. The reason we have criminal laws is to deter criminals from committing those crimes and deter what would otherwise be law-abiding citizens from committing those crimes. Well, if you're not going to enforce your laws, then you're going to get a lot more criminal conduct, because there are a lot of people who think that it's okay just to go grab somebody else's stuff and to use a knife or a gun if that's what's necessary to be successful in grabbing other people's stuff. Gosh, look at California and shoplifting and how they watered down the shoplifting laws. And now you've got a bunch of retailers who are going out of business because they're losing so much money to shoplifters. That's a glaring example of what happens when you get soft on crime. And so in these major metropolitan areas, They wanted more crime, as evidenced by the policies that they imposed, and they're getting it. It's their just rewards.
Coach, let me ask you this. So I'm following the case out there, the guy that killed Charlie Kirk, and it seems to me open and shut. Like, what is his defense gonna? Are they gonna try to like say he's crazy or insanity to try to get him off, or what are they doing? What are they gonna do?
Well, they'll conjure up something, but in my judgment, it won't work. He will be convicted by a jury, and I hope he will get the harshest penalty allowed by law.
Congressman, Turning Point USA held a big mega rally at Auburn, I think Wednesday night. The featured speakers were Eric and Laura Trump. As someone in the crowd, they sounded an awful lot like candidates. And Eric actually admitted to the audience that he was the one that came up with the whole Trump 2028 hats and signs that have been popping up.
Well,
Do you think that we're looking at a third Trump presidency, sort of like we had from George H. Bush to George W. Bush?
Well, it won't be the first time. We've had a lot of family political dynasties in various parts of the United States of America. Heck, in Alabama, we had George Wallace, and we had George Wallace Jr. Okay.
And Lurleen Wallace.
Yeah, well, that's right. Lurleen Wallace. So you had two Governor Wallaces, husband and wife, and you had State Treasurer George Wallace Jr. And you could go throughout the United States, and you could find many occasions in which there have been these family dynasties, so to speak. Now, sometimes it's because the first one elected in that family really did a really good job, okay?
And sometimes you have like the Comos in New York.
Well, yeah, I'll defer to everybody else's judgment on who did a good job and who did a bad job. But sometimes the kids reap the benefit of the reputations of the parents, and I don't really have a problem with that, as long as the kids and the parents both do good jobs. I just want better elected officials than, unfortunately, what we've been hamstrung with, particularly in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, let's not forget too. We had the Folsoms, the two Baxleys ended up as lieutenant governor, and Fobb's son Tim ran for governor too. So Alabama pretty has a long history of it.
And three Heflin served in. It was three Heflin served in the U.S. Senate.
Well, a lot of politics and campaigning is name recognition, and anytime you've got the same last name as a popular elected official, that is a big advantage in a campaign.
Do you think it still is important as what it once was? I mean, because Hillary Clinton, she had two chances and couldn't capitalize on it.
Well, sometimes we have bad politicians. The name recognition doesn't help. Okay. Bill Clinton did some good things, but he was one of the most sordid presidents, dishonorable presidents that's ever served in the White House. I mean, who can forget Monica Lewinsky? And who can forget how he committed felony perjury, but the Democrats still defended him in the United States Senate on the charges of impeachment. You probably don't want me going on about Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton, although we've got another Clinton who's thinking about it, so we'll see how she does.
Let me ask this though, kind of along those same lines. I mean, is there anybody in the Democratic Party that's close to a Bill Clinton on policy issues? Because it seems like everybody's so far left that there's no centrist in there anymore. I mean, Cuomo was saying he was the moderate.
Yeah, Clinton was a traditional liberal. Cuomo probably was a traditional liberal, but the Democratic Party, to a very large degree, has been taken over by the dictatorial socialist wing of society. And that's unfortunate. But the people who are most active in campaigns are the ones who are most motivated by their ideology to be active. And give credit where credit is due. The dictatorial socialists, they believe in what they're doing, much like some people believe in Christianity or Islam or Judaism. I mean, it's a religious fervor for some of these dictatorial socialists, even to the point where they try to kill their opposition. You know, we've seen that. Or they applaud the killing of their opposition. We've seen that. And so it's getting harder and harder for anyone near the middle of the road to win a Democrat primary.
You know, we had Tommy Tuberville, who translated his football coaching career and popularity into being U.S. Senator without having served in another elected office, and he's about to become the governor, barring something really unforeseen happening. Now we've got A.J. McCarron, who's never held a public office and never voted before, now running for lieutenant governor based on his popularity as a football player. Is this a growing deal or just a couple of individuals where people that are popular in other walks of life turn that popularity into political careers when their original careers are played out?
I don't think it's unusual. You've had sports figures in other parts of the country get elected to public office, Congress, United States Senate. Ronald Reagan was an actor, and that's where his fame came from, being an actor. And that helped get him elected governor of the state of California and later president of the United States. So anything that you do that's in the public eye on a regular basis makes you a better chance of winning candidate for whatever public office you want to seek. And A.J. McCarron, at least with at least with Alabama fans, he's got a pretty good reputation. So we'll see how it plays out. It's not a guarantee if you've got the name ID that you're going to win. It certainly helps, whether it be from your parents or from sports activities or acting or what have you. But ultimately, you're also going to have to be able to project your persona in a way that the voters like. And I don't know how A.J. McCarron is at that in the kind of arena that he's now entering. And then it helps to have the right public policy positions that's consistent with what your electorate demands, whether it be in a Republican primary or a Democrat primary. So I want to wish A.J. McCarron a pleasant journey as he stepped his feet into this political arena. And heck, what's the worst that can happen to him? He could win.
Congressman, do you think, along some lines, do you think, I've heard Stephen A. Smith talking about running for president, and they considered Mark Cuban for vice president with Kamala Harris. Do you think we're going to see more celebrities get involved?
Well, that kind of brings up one we've got in the White House right now. I don't know how the world I left him out. He was an actor of sorts in the TV show The Apprentice. So yeah, it would help with Mark Cuban. It would help with Stephen A. Smith. Now you got to be a little bit careful in your remarks. For example, Feinbaum is a rumored candidate for public office. I don't know if he's going to do it or not do it, but he's pretty hardball in some of his comments in the public sports arena, and he might have alienated some fans by some of the things he said that were less than kind about well-liked coaches or well-liked players or well-liked schools. I don't know how all that's going to play out. And so he's got the name ID. If he wasn't on TV so much and on the radio so much, people wouldn't know about him, but they know about him now. And
I got called on a push poll with him the other night. they asked me, who I plan to vote for, and then they threw his name in there. And then the next question was if I knew that he was a ex-Disney employee who would fight the woke agenda, would that make me more likely to vote for him? If I knew Steve Marshall was a liberal Democrat who voted for Obama, would that make me less likely to vote for him? If I knew Barry Moore voted for taxes and had a $45,000 tax lien against him, would that make me less likely to vote for him?
Yeah, that's just parcel for part of and parcel of politics. I wish it wasn't that way, but those push polls, I don't know who's going to watch this show we're putting on right now, but if you get a push poll, ignore it, because that is where politicians, candidates, campaign gurus lie the most about their opponents and about themselves. Some anonymous push poll that spreads ugly rumors about people that may not have a grain of truth to them, that unfortunately is one of the sorrier aspects of politics. It deters a lot of people from running for public office because of that kind of conduct.
Congressman, we've kept you for just about an hour now. That's really all I have. Is there something you'd like to add before we go?
Well, watch the economy. The unemployment rate has slowly but surely eroded from 4% when Trump was inaugurated to 4.3% now. The economic news, anecdotal, that we have about the employment status is not good. The inflation rate was about 3% when Donald Trump was inaugurated, and it got better down to around 2.3% in the spring, but now it's back up to 3%. Now, I don't know about you guys. I don't trust the inflation numbers. My personal experience shopping, and as a retired person, I get to shop now. Prices are through the roof, and there's no way in the world they've only gone up by 3%, at least the things that I tend to buy. But watch the inflation rate, watch the deficit and debt, and be prepared to batten down the hatches if needed, if the economy goes south in a very big way. I'd have food storage, which you always ought to have for emergency purposes. I'd probably have things like medicines that you might need. This government shutdown, it gives you an idea as to how big of an impact the federal government can have. And it hasn't been good during this shutdown. And if the federal government goes insolvent or bankrupt because of our $38 trillion debt, if something triggers our creditors to decide, and they have every right to make this decision, to not loan the United States of America any more money, we're going to be in a world of hurt. And the people who prepared for that day are going to be the ones who survive it in better shape rather than worse shape.
Congressman, thanks a lot. Enjoy the holidays and get in touch with you at the first of the year.
All right. Y'all take care.